about the larger context of what's going on in Minneapolis today, which I'm sure is very distressing to all of us. And I want to begin by offering our personal thoughts and prayers to the family of George Floyd, on behalf of all New Yorkers who have seen that incredible video. We can imagine your pain, and you are in our thoughts and prayers. I would also suggest that when we think about this situation and we start to analyze the situation and the reaction, let's not make the same mistake that we continually make, which is we tend to see incidents. This is an incident, an isolated incident, and people focus on an isolated incident. It's not an isolated incident. It is a continuum of cases and situations that have been going on for decades and decades and decades. These are just chapters in a book, and the title of the book is Continuing Injustice and Inequality in America. And these are just chapters. The chapters started modern day Rodney King in Los Angeles, 1991. Abner Louima in New York, 1997. Amadou Diallo in New York, 1999. Sean Bell in New York, 2006. Oscar Grant, Oakland, California, 2009. Eric Garner, New York City, 2014. Michael Brown, Missouri, 2014. Laquan McDonald, Chicago, 2014. Freddie Gray, Baltimore, 2015. Antoine Rose, Pittsburgh, 2018. Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, 2020. Breonna Taylor in Kentucky, 2020. George Floyd in Minneapolis, 2020. That's why the outrage. That's why the frustration and the anger. It is not about one situation. It's about the same situation happening again and again and again and again, and seeing the same thing and not learning the lesson. And then it's that happening in a broader context and a broader circumstances, which is what's going on with the coronavirus, which affects and kills more minorities than anyone else. You look around this country and you look at the people who are dying of the coronavirus, it is disproportionate African American people. And it's just a continuing injustice, and that's the frustration and that's the protests. Nobody is sanctioning the arson and the thuggery and the burglaries, but the protesters and the anger and the fear and the frustration, yes, yes. And the demand is for justice. And when the prosecutor came out and said, well, there's other evidence, but I can't tell you anything more than that, that only incited the frustration. Injustice in the justice system. How repugnant to the concept of America. And over and over and over again. I stand figuratively with the protesters. I stand against the arson and the burglary and the criminality. I stand with the protesters. And I think all well-meaning Americans stand with the protesters. Enough is enough. How many times do you have to see the same lesson replayed before you do something? This country is better than this. It has been better than this. And it shouldn't take this long to end basic discrimination and basic injustice. Any questions?
Governor, about the June 8th reopening, what becomes the challenge and begins to become the challenge is commuting. So earlier today, the mayor used the word improvise when answering whether some New Yorker would decide whether to drive in or to take the subway. Is that the right way to look at it? You have to sort of improvise and make that decision, or should there be guidance and ideas for how we do this?
Yeah, there is, well, improvise. I think the mayor's point was, it's up to you. You know, you want to go into New York City, you go into New York City the way you want to go into New York City. If you want to drive, you can drive. You want to pay that parking, you want to deal with that traffic, that's your business. If you want to take public transit, you take public transit. I understand why people would be anxious about public transit. That's why the MTA is doing extraordinary work. They really are. I mean, people used to complain about how the MTA cleaned trains and buses, right? They didn't clean the trains and buses well enough. Well, they're now disinfecting them. I mean, that standard was just unimaginable, right? You can disinfect a train. They're doing it. Closing the subways at night helped, but they're disinfecting trains. The trains are disinfected. They're using UV lights. They're using all sorts of chemicals. They're experimenting with films that you can spray on that kill a virus for 30 days.
Of pain that are barely below the surface on the day-to-day. Now, some are planning protest here. And as the superintendent said yesterday, under his leadership, the department has been hard at work developing authentic relationships to restore trust with our communities. And the superintendent and his team, as well as myself and my team, we have continued that important engagement. Working, of course, with protest organizers, community leaders, faith leaders, and more to make sure that we keep the channels of communication flowing, keep folks safe, and give space to those who want to peacefully exercise their First Amendment rights and demonstrate their righteous anger. Let me remind all of us, this is Chicago, and we've been through difficult times before. We haven't forgotten the days following the release of the video showing the murder of Laquan McDonald and following the deaths of too many other names, both before that time and after, that we can now recite as a painful mantra. Chicago is known for its legacy of spearheading bold yet peaceful protest movements. We must also have all necessary plans in place to keep things safe, to protect people, property, and lives, and above all, to remind people that we are protesting amid a viral outbreak. Now, what I'm next going to say, I recognize the irony of. But folks, please march, exercise your rights, but wear face coverings. Bring hand sanitizers. Ensure distance between one another, even as you're marching. If you feel sick, please stay home. And remember that you could also be COVID positive and be asymptomatic. Now, it's impossible for me as a Black woman who has been the target of blatant racism over the course of my life not to take the killing of George Floyd personally. Watching that poor man beg for his life and for the ability to breathe, and then watching the life leave him there on the streets, I feel angry, I feel sickened, and a range of other emotions all at once. Being Black in America should not be a death sentence. We should not fear for the lives of our loved ones, and mothers shouldn't fear when their young men and women go out into the world that they're going to get that fateful call. And let me say one other thing. Donald Trump's comment last night was profoundly dangerous. And we must stand in firm solidarity and say this is totally unacceptable, no matter who is the speaker. And folks, we see the game he's playing because it's so transparent and he's not very good at it. He wants to show failures on the part of Democratic local leaders to throw red meat to his base. His goal is to polarize, to destabilize local government and inflame racist urges. And we can absolutely not let him prevail. And I will code what I really want to say to Donald Trump. It's 2 words. It begins with F and it ends with U. I will not remain silent while this man cynically tries to turn this incredibly painful moment into one for his own political gain. And let me end this comment by saying the following. I continue to pray for the family of George Floyd and for the city of Minneapolis. And I pray for all of us to find peace in this difficult and painful time.
We're here to address a very painful reality. There are demonstrations happening as we speak in the city, and they're happening because a man is dead. George Floyd is dead. He's dead because he was black. He was killed because he was black. It's as simple as that. It's as horrible as that. It's as painful as that. And it's as unacceptable as that. And there are people right now all over this city, all over this country, expressing that pain, that anger that someone was killed simply because of the color of their skin in 2020 in the United States of America. And we cannot in any way pretend that this is anything less than an indictment of the kind of racism that still exists all over this country, that is so painfully alive and well in so many of our institutions, that we have to find a way to stop, because it will corrode this nation, this society, this city, if we don't overcome the racism surrounding us at all times. This man was killed in broad daylight. The officer involved seemed to show no emotion whatsoever that he was taking a man's life. And imagine what that says to people. Imagine how much anger that creates. It would create deep, passionate pain if it was the only time it ever happened, but it's happened time and time and time again. And people are asking, when will it ever stop? That's why there are so many people protesting. I have to acknowledge, when I was a young man growing up, I never had to, for 1 minute, wonder if a police officer would stop me and treat me negatively because of who I was. Never even crossed my mind. And I think for all of us who happen to be white, the vast majority of us, we just haven't experienced it. We haven't walked a mile in the shoes of our brothers and sisters who are people of color, who have dealt with this pain so often. So what we are seeing coming out in this city and all over the country right now is that pain, that anger from what people have grown up with and never for a moment been able to get away from. That sense that at any given moment they might be singled out simply because of who they were, and that the results could even be deadly. That is what people are grappling with every minute of every day. I need those of you out there who are listening and watching and share the same skin color with me. We're all trying to understand. I'm asking you to understand more deeply. Think of every minute of your life if you had to wonder if what happened to George Floyd would happen to you or your children. So when I see this pain, I can only try my best to understand it. Now, to all the people who are protesting, please, even if you're expressing that pain, that anger, that sense that something's wrong and must be fixed, please remember how important it is to protest peacefully. Remember, the only way we're going to make things right is by somehow finding a way to work together. Please remember that we're in the middle of a pandemic. We have to do all we can to protect each other. Everyone out there has a responsibility. Even though I think I understand some piece of the anger you're feeling, I'm still beseeching you. We are still all in this together, and you must protest peacefully. Be mindful of what it means for everyone around you. Now, our police officers have been given a very clear instruction, as always: respect peaceful protest. We in this city have a long history of respecting every kind of viewpoint. That is the essence of New York City. The NYPD protects and respects peaceful protest, and the NYPD will also make clear what the ground rules are. and ask all protesters to recognize those ground rules and respect them. Commissioner Shea will speak to that more. But I'm going to also offer this thought to all those who protest. If you are angry with the government, if you're angry with the elected leaders, direct that anger to all of us, because if we haven't done enough, then we are the ones who should be held responsible. But the police officer in front of you is a working man or woman just trying to do their job. They did not create the policies, they did not create the pain, they did not create the contradictions of our society that we need to resolve. Take your anger out on those who hold the power, wherever it may reside. But please try your best to understand that the working man and woman in front of you is your fellow human being, just trying to keep...
Said I can't take it anymore, because it's hardly his first experience or his kid's first experience. You know, just that wasn't caught on videotape. That was just a day in the life of that one child and just another family. Happens every single day all across this country. We are so much better than that. And so I sit here deeply humbled, been emotional about this moment, and deeply resolved to try to meet it head on and try to do more and do better. I couldn't be more proud of this state in that space. I talked to Dr. Shirley Weber today. She reminded me it was 1 year ago today that the California Assembly passed a landmark police use of force bill, AB 392. It was a year ago today that passed the Assembly. And how proud we all were of her and a coalition behind her that included law enforcement, that met that moment a year ago to work together across their differences in a collaborative spirit to recognize that we could do more and do better on the issue of training our police officers on implicit bias. And we could do more to provide the support and resources to truly train our police officers, not mandate certain things without supporting that change of behavior. We've made a lot of progress in the state, but my gosh, I was reminded again even this morning, incident down in San Diego, a young man on a bench. Details of that are insignificant in the context of the totality and the magnitude of incidents of that kind that persist all across this country that are not part of the conversation on the nightly news. So our hearts go out to George Floyd and his family, of course. The entire community that has been torn asunder, absolutely. But we have to be more resolved now than ever to do more and be better as human beings, as parents, as leaders in our own right, and to model better behavior and soften the edges and make, in the spirit of Dr. King and Kennedy, to make more gentle the life of this world, because it was King, just like Father Cause, that reminded all of us that we're all bound together by a web of mutuality, that we're all in this together. There's no leak on your side of our boat. And so in that spirit of the Commonwealth and that spirit that defines the best of our state, the best of our nation, and what we promote and what we promise, I hope we can all just practice a little bit more and lean into this moment and make this moment more meaningful, not just in the spirit of a young man whose life was taken away, but in the spirit of so many lives that are impacted every single day through structural racism and through our incapacity as a society to wake up to the realities that persist all across this state and all across this nation. Institutions, large and small, that fundamentally have to change, not least of which our criminal justice institutions. We can do more, we can do better, and so forgive me for being long-winded. There's no script here, for being a little circuitous in my comments and perhaps commentary, but I would be remiss if I just didn't express, as a point of privilege, a point of view, again, humbly, with a deep recognition that we have a lot of work to do, and I'm resolved to doing that work with each and every one of you and to bring people together at a time when we so desperately need people to focus on what we have in common. And my gosh, is that overwhelming what we have in common. And so let us commit ourselves to that in the spirit of this moment and of the spirit of this weekend, where I pray that all of us that want to express ourselves do so thoughtfully and gently, but forcefully in terms of expressing themselves as they should and as they must, so that we collectively can not only hear your voice, but we can resolve to do something with the lesson that we learn if just we take the time to listen, finally listen, and do more and do better. So that's how I wanted to begin. And forgive me, this sort of seems trivial. I want to now transition a little bit into the work at hand and connect a dot, because the issues related to COVID-19, the issues related to health, the issues related to our economy and our economic recovery have obvious tenets that connect this moment so directly. The issues of race, the issues of racism, the issues are a big part of the real work that we have in front of us as it relates to addressing the issues of public health, public safety, and economic growth and recovery. I'm going to set forth some slides that lay out some principles that we are advancing in the state of California as we make modifications to our stay-at-home order, and then I will also present some slides which highlight what I mean as it relates to the disparities that persist, that came into this crisis and persist through this crisis, that also must be addressed if we are to do justice as a state and as a nation. So fundamentally, and again, forgive me for the transition, let me begin with a foundational principle, which is a core construct, and that is a reminder that localism is determinative. At the end of the day, whatever our ideals are as a state and as a nation.
Like many, I've been watching the news and just horrified by what we saw in the video. George Floyd's family deserves a thorough and timely and impartial investigation into the protocol and procedure and the events and circumstances surrounding his death. Every time something like this happens, whether it makes the news or not, it's just another reminder that we've not treated this broken component of our culture with the urgency that it demands. And there has not been enough urgency in doing the hard work that we need to do as a country to enact the cultural change. It's long overdue, and I cannot pretend that I understand the exhaustion or the desperation that African Americans across our country are feeling right now. Can't imagine being a mother who's afraid every time her son goes out in public that he might not come home. But what I do understand is that it's on every leader in this country to work urgently until we achieve that cultural change that's overdue. And it's incumbent on every one of us to stand up for what is right. We have to hold people accountable, people that perpetuate these abhorrent actions. George Floyd's death and the deaths of many others, Ahmaud Arbery, Trayvon Martin, Renisha McBride, they're not isolated incidents, but they're a part of a systemic cycle of racial injustice in our country. I thought this question might come, and that's why I wanted to jot down a few thoughts, because it is important that we get this right. The events of the last couple of weeks have really sent a clear message that Black lives are under threat every single day, whether it's the fear of law enforcement or the fear of this pandemic. And we cannot live in a society and a country where our rights and dignity are not equal for everyone.